We did not seek battle, men, but nor shall we run from it. These scarce believe us weak, but they shall find us as lions. For I know you. Each of you is worth 10 of them, and together we shall triumph this day.
You bastards! I will cut out your hearts and eat them!
After Scipio's unexpected assault and seizure of Carthago Nova, according to Polybius, the three Carthaginian forces in Iberia remained divided and their generals were at strife, enabling the Romans the opportunity to deal with each one of them separately. As soon as Carthago Nova fell, the Roman commander promptly dispatched Laelius to the capital to alert the Senate. He intended to do this in order to persuade the Roman aristocracy to support his army more. After taking the city, Scipio stayed around for a while, making his men go through a tiresome military drill. Next, with the intention of launching a campaign against one of the Punic armies present in the Iberian Peninsula, he sent his army to Tarraco where they would be housed for the winter. It is challenging to ascertain his opponent's strategies. Hasdrubal Barca, one of the Punic commanders in Spain, sought to travel to Italy to support Hannibal. He intended to battle Scipio. However, it is difficult to believe Polybius' statement that he intended to invade Italy only if the combat went badly. Early in the year 208 BC, Hasdrubal Barca's 30,000-man army, which had spent the previous winter at Baecula on the upper banks of the river Baetis, today's Guadalquivir, was attacked by Scipio Africanus and his 30,000 Roman, Italian, and 10,000 Spanish auxiliary men. After learning of the Roman approach, Hasdrubal moved his camp to a good defensive position south of Baecula, a high and steep plateau guarded by ravines on the flanks and the river to the front and back. The plateau was divided into two steps, with Hasdrubal stationing his screen of light troops, Numidian horse and Balearic slingers on the lower step and his main camp on the step beyond. Scipio was first unsure about how to assault such a strong position after his arrival, but on the third day, out of anxiety that the other two Carthaginian armies may take advantage of his indecision and combine with Hasdrubal Barca, he moved to attack. Scipio has ordered his light troops, including the Velites, to scale the first step of the enemy's position. Scaling such a position would have been a difficult and dangerous task, as the rocky ascent would have provided little cover and the defenders would have been able to rain down a shower of darts and stones on the attackers. However, the Roman light troops were well trained and determined, and their use of cover allowed them to gain the crest of the hill despite the difficulties of the climb. Once they had secured a foothold, their superior weaponry and training in close combat gave them an advantage over the Carthaginian skirmishers, who were likely more accustomed to fighting at a distance with missile weapons. The battle would have been chaotic and violent, with the Roman Velites using their short swords and javelins to engage the Carthaginians in close combat. The Carthaginians, for their part, would have been using a variety of weapons, including spears, slingshots, and possibly even bows and arrows. As the Roman light troops pressed forward, the Carthaginian skirmishers were driven back in disorder on the higher ridge. This would have been a confusing and frightening experience for the Carthaginians, as they would have been forced to retreat under a hail of Roman weapons and the pressure of the advancing troops. Overall, after a hard-fought and intense battle, with both sides using their skills and training to gain the upper hand, Carthaginians' front line was already wavering. The Roman Velites, with their superior weaponry and training in close combat, were ultimately able to prevail over the Carthaginian skirmishers and gain control of the high ground. Scipio had his army prepared within their camp and dispatched his whole light troops to support a frontal attack. He divided his heavy infantry into two groups, with himself leading one half around the left flank of the enemy's position, and Laelius leading the other group to skirt the opposite flank of the ridge until finding a good line of ascent. Scipio's men took the shorter circuit and climbed the ridge first, catching the Carthaginians off guard as Hasdrubal had delayed leading his main forces out of the camp. This delay allowed Scipio's forces to fall on the Carthaginians' flank before they could properly deploy. This tactic of dividing the heavy infantry into two groups and attacking the flanks of the enemy position is a classic military maneuver. By splitting his forces, Scipio was able to catch the Carthaginians off guard and gain an advantage. The use of light troops to support the frontal attack also allowed Scipio to keep the Carthaginians distracted and prevent them from focusing all their attention on the flanks. This prevented the Carthaginians from being able to react quickly enough to Scipio's flanking maneuvers. In the midst of this chaos, Laelius came on the scene and hit Carthaginians from left flank. As the enemy backed away to prevent damage being inflicted from the rear, their front disintegrated. That gave even the men in the center the opportunity to climb to the top, though this they could never have succeeded in doing over such broken ground had the Carthaginian ranks remained solid, with the elephants' position before the standards. There was slaughter on every side, and Scipio, who had charged the enemy's right wing with his left, was wreaking particular havoc on the now exposed flanks. There was no room left at this point even for flight. Roman detachments had blocked the roads on both sides, to the right and left, and the camp gate had been shut by the commander and his officers as they made their escape. In addition, the elephants had been startled, and the Carthaginians were as afraid of the panic-stricken beasts as they were of the enemy. Polybius states that Hasdrubal had originally planned to retreat to Gaul in case of a defeat and recruit as many of the natives as possible before joining his brother Hannibal in Italy. Whether this was actually the case or not is uncertain, but as soon as Hasdrubal realized that the battle was lost, he fled from the hill with his treasure and elephants and tried to collect as many fugitives as he could before retreating up the river Tagus in the direction of the Pyrenees. However, Scipio had anticipated this move and had sent two cohorts ahead of his main army to block two of the main lines of retreat. This, along with Scipio's double envelopment tactic, caught the bulk of the Carthaginian troops like a net. As a result, 8,000 Carthaginians were killed, and 12,000 were taken prisoner. Interestingly, Scipio showed his political sagacity by sending the Spanish prisoners home without ransom while the African prisoners were sold as slaves. This was likely a calculated move to win over the hearts and minds of the Spanish people and show them that the Romans were not their enemies, but rather the Carthaginians. Following the battle, Hasdrubal attempted to reach his brother Hannibal by leading his decimated army, which was primarily made up of Iberian mercenaries and Gallic warriors, over the western Pyrenees passes into Gaul and then into Italy. The Roman Senate chastised Scipio for failing to halt Hasdrubal's march into Italy. Scipio decided to retreat to his stronghold at Tarraco rather than use his victory at Baecula to force the Carthaginians out of Iberia. After the Roman victories at Carthago Nova and Baecula, several Iberian tribes changed sides, and Scipio was able to forge partnerships with them. In 207 BC, Carthaginian reinforcements arrived in Iberia, where they would shortly conduct a last-ditch effort to make up for their defeat at the Battle of Ilipa in 206 BC.